Hello, and welcome to the InvestOps podcast. I'm Natalie McIntyre, Global Head of Consulting at Cutter Associates, a management consulting firm that works exclusively with the investment management industry, partnering with heads of operations, technology, and the C-suite as they navigate large-scale change. Last month, at the 10th Annual InvestOps Conference, we had the opportunity to speak with the investment operations leaders about the challenges and opportunities facing them. Today's conversation is with two of those leaders about the future of investment operations, and more specifically, how that future is being shaped by the leaders responsible for delivering it. Over the past several years, operations has undergone a fundamental shift. What was once viewed primarily as a control function is now central to growth, resilience, and competitive differentiation. Asset classes are expanding, client expectations are rising, regulatory scrutiny remains intense, and technology change has become constant rather than episodic. As a result, the role of head of operations has never been more complex or more strategic. To explore what that really means in practice, I'm joined today by two senior leaders who sit at the center of that transformation across public and private markets. With us, we'll have Mariam Osman, Chief Operating Officer for Investment Operations at BlackRock, and Andrew Onslow, Managing Director and Global Head of Investment Operations at Morgan Stanley Investment Management. Each of these leaders leads their operations at scale, but in very different operating environments. That diversity is exactly what makes this conversation valuable. Over the next 30 minutes, we're going to focus on a few core questions: how the mandate for operations leadership is evolving, where transformation is genuinely delivering value and where it's been harder than expected, what capabilities will matter most as firms look ahead, and finally, what heads of operations should be prioritizing today to build functions that will thrive tomorrow.
Andrew, Mariam, a common theme throughout the conference for the last couple of days has just been change. Everybody seems to agree on it. So what has changed for heads of operations, right? Can you share with me a little bit about your perspective?
Yeah, look, I think I was thinking about this the other day. As I think about my career in operations, normally demand for change has outstripped supply. I think we're really in a paradigm shift now where supply is outstripping demand. What I mean by that is that the opportunities for firms to really reinvent and transform the way they work is at an all-time high. And I think that could be quite confusing because the amount of things that are available, you have to work out how you're going to access that and make it work for your firm.
Yeah, I would say the amount of change has grown tremendously, right? I think we've all kind of gotten into a place where we've been able to automate a lot of our different processes, equities, fixed income, the normal pieces of it, but now we're seeing more complexity come on board. And how are we going to take that complexity and again, automate it and make it more scalable and efficient? And I think with the introduction of AI and all of the different tools that we have available, are able to develop things a lot faster than what we've done before. So the amount of investment, the amount of people and skill sets are also changing in that time frame.
Can you guys take me through that tension? Because it sounds like change is the focus, but we still have businesses to run. So how do you balance the tension between running the business while adapting to all of these new ways of working, while modernizing all of your platforms and systems?
Yeah, I think what we've been speaking about over the last couple of days is the amount of change, but I think it can be quite daunting. And so the way I think about it is really we need to work out where we're going and what we're aiming for. And I think that really is about a multi-year plan and a multi-year journey. It'd be very easy to come in here and say, what's available right now? How do I incrementally improve on what I have today? But I think it's unlikely that some of those incremental improvements over many years, in some will come to the right place in 3 years' time. So I think working out what the North Star is and where you want to be and why you want to be there, what's driving it, reducing risk, increasing efficiency, introducing scale, but also really generating the right client experience. If you can work out what great looks like in 3 years' time, I think then what you do is a sequential journey over the next 3 years to get there. And I think that really helps to inform organizations about where to invest, but also the type of talent needed to get there.
Has the definition of ops evolved for you though, beyond just kind of traditional post-trade? Are you seeing that change for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, no. I would say change is the only constant, right? to some degree. I think ops has become a critical path for any change to occur, right? So if we're looking at the world of digital, we're looking at the world of crypto, stable coins, 24 hours trading, trading on Sundays, whatever it may be, nothing cannot happen without the operational space. And I think many people are realizing that's the case.
Yeah, I think just adding to what you're saying there, I think operations in my time has always been a cost center. So how do you reduce the cost that is an operations cost to increase the productivity, the efficiency of the firm overall? I think now operations, it helps in asset gathering, it helps in asset retention, and it really helps to enable a broader organization to offer customized solutions for clients.
I just want to add on to that, sorry. So I think, when we talk about operations, I was not in operations my whole career. I've only been in operations for about 6 years, but I've seen the other side of it. We've spent so much time on alpha for investment teams and trading and PMs, and I think there's a lot more alpha, operational alpha, to kind of come on board, whether we're looking at margin efficiencies for treasuries, whether we're looking at real-time data, interest rates, how our portfolio teams are going to be investing. And this is probably one of the most exciting times to be in the space.
Yeah, and I think if you look at, I always try and start with the client, because none of us would be in this industry if we didn't have clients. And if you look at the democratization of the private and public side of businesses, 5 years ago, you would never have had a publicly distributed daily pricing private fund, but they're here.
Yeah.
So the need to service clients and funds is different today than it has ever been, and that really forces us as an industry to change. Not only change as asset managers, to partner with the fintechs and with the service providers together to enable this change. No one organization can succeed and do this on their own.
Okay. Now, maybe just going a level down more tactically, how are you measuring your success, right? How do you actually articulate the difference that you're making?
So look, I think we have a broader program where we've got 6 pillars, and I won't go into each of those in details, but going back to my earlier comment, one of those is the client experience. So that is one of the key measures, on top of productivity, efficiency, and everything else. But I think when we're thinking about the impact of change from an efficiency perspective, we measure it by hours. So how can we actually commit to a number of hours saved through the operation as a whole, and how we're going to deliver it, and then you turn that into a cost of labor saving. So you can reinvest a part of that, but also we're giving some of that back in a labor cost reduction.
Yeah. I mean, I think the mission of ops is always to fulfill the ambitious growth of the business. I think when you talk about measurements of success, if we've been able to build the product, if we've been able to kind of fulfill our client demands, that is success. But also we keep a lot of metrics inside, our space, whether it's your cost of trade or whether it's we've had the same number of people within our middle office space for the last 10 years, right? So if you think about the amount of volume that has increased, the amount of complexity that has increased, I would say the job of operations is to work yourself out of a job, and that's when you're truly successful, right? And if you stay complacent, you won't get there, but you have to constantly be in that world of innovation, automation, and efficiency.
So maybe pivoting for a second though, for years we've heard about big trends, outsourcing, data, platform modernization, AI now. Where is it really paying off? Where have you done the work and you can genuinely hand over heart say, others should follow, this should become the standard, the new best practice for our industry? And maybe where hasn't it worked?
I don't think there's one size that fits all. I mean, the industry, the asset manager community is too complex and too varied. Not everybody's playing in the same asset class pool. Some are global, some are regional, so there isn't one size fits all. But I do think a really good place to start is thinking about not only that client journey and about where do you want to be for your clients, but it's really thinking about how do you simplify. But thinking about simplifying, I think it starts without thinking about technology, and it starts without thinking about AI. It starts thinking about a transformational mindset and a transformational culture. It's very difficult to change an organization without being transformative in an approach. And many of the people who've been a part of investment operations for the last decade, 2 decades, would have been very used to doing things in a certain way. and they work 98% of the time. So it's very difficult, and the human instinct is very much geared towards I don't need to change it because it's not broken. So I think for us, really bringing in some transformational leaders and some people who are going to change culturally the mindset of the organization, many who don't have a background in operations, many who don't have a background in asset management, are really some of the catalysts that are required for more of a fundamental change.
Yeah, I mean, if I think back my experience, I've been in technology on the business side, trading, and now operations. The lens that comes with that ability to see different perspective changes, right? I think we have been on the forefront of change. We run a hackathon for the entire firm, but we also run a hackathon within the operations space to get those ideas generating from all of our different areas to be able to assess where are your pain points, right? If you look at data, I think a lot of people have done a lot with data, and the data has to be right for the AI to then be right. So it's almost like cumulative in terms of how these stepping stones are built and what comes out of it afterwards. AI is just another tool for us to get to where we want to get to, right? So I know it's the buzzword for now, but if we can make us efficient, if it can get us to that automation, then fantastic. Let it get us there.
But back to your question about where have some of the gains come from and where have they not come from, I think one of the big shifts over the last 2 years is really to put tools in the hands of the users. Mm-hmm. So a lot of what is thought about historically as a top-down strategy, about what are we going to ask the organization to do and what tools are we going to give them to use. Over the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of success in user-led tools. Having somebody talk to their colleagues and their peers about, look what I've managed to do with this tool, creates a level of excitement, energy, and capability that then travels through osmosis through the rest of the organization. So there's this real combination of bottoms-up generation of efficiency in user-led tools and pro-dev tools, but then also you've got the AI strategy coming more of a top-down strategy. I think it's the blend of those things that's really seeing an opportunity.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that because we make the tools available as well, but I think we can't do it alone. The piece is that we need everybody in the ecosystem to kind of come along for the ride and the journey, and partnerships are so very important in terms of who your third-party vendors are, or your banks or your brokers, et cetera, because nothing is just us.
Yeah, picking on that, I think your use of the word partners, I think it has changed to partners. It used to be service providers.
Oh yeah.
And it was like a one-way street, what are you providing me? Exactly.
Absolutely.
And that partnership in everything we do now is so important.
Yeah. But let me pull that one thread though, because underpinning self-service and AI, I think both of you are acknowledging, is data. But for so many years, these data programs have failed. What's different now?
The data has to be right? And I think if you look at AI has to learn, right? Yeah. So it's the people who are going to really understand the processes and how we're bringing it together, right? I mean, I think, yes, you can have AI look at breaks and say, okay, this is the sort of, it should be assigned here and here. But if that person's not there to design it properly, then it will never be right. And this goes back to proper business requirements. It's the same sort of, I think, fundamentals that we need, like you're listening to the entire business, everybody's priorities are your priorities. So how do you prioritize within your own space? How do you make sure you have the right resources? How do you make sure you're giving people the right tools? But the person who's going to know and connect the dots is going to be the most important.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, it's now been 10 years of InvestOps. I wasn't here 10 years ago, but I can imagine we were talking about data.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
So it's a difficult nut to crack. And I think I would agree with Mariam says, it is the key to many of the things that now apply, whether it's around being able to build product, about delivering solutions for clients, but also efficiency, risk, and automation. And I'd say there are companies that have invested multiple years ago to build the concept, either internally or with a partner, a data warehouse. And on top of that data warehouse, you have strict and strong governance. And therefore you drive towards a golden source. And it doesn't really matter what that one system is or what you name it, whether it sits within the asset manager, outside the asset manager, but having that golden source and that referential database of the data you need and you need to consume is really a key to success. It's table stakes now. There are the language models out there for AI, which are important, but that data you have within the construct of an organization again, going back to the democratization of public and private, why should a client of a firm expect to receive two different styles of reports, one for the public side and one for the private side? Being able to bring that data into a common data set and report as one organization, as one brand, it's not optional, it's essential.
Agreed. From my perspective, right, I've been in data for investment management for just as long as InvestOps has been around, and what I've seen is a fundamental shift away from you have to figure it out on your own to we now have commoditized solutions, right? Same thing in the convergence of public-private markets. We're starting to see a ubiquity in how firms want to approach this, and so now we have tools and partners we can go to accelerate this, as opposed to having to figure it out on our own, having to design our own data model, build everything from scratch, right? Bring together hardcore infrastructure and actually create horsepower now because there's something we can buy off the shelf. Yeah. And so I'm very curious and excited to see if we're able to unlock over the next 2 to 3 years in a way that I think we've been stuck for almost the last 10, because it is essential now, right? In order to access AI, in order to create self-service, we need that layer underneath to be able to pull it together.
Yeah, I agree, and I think a lot of these conversations are now happening at the most senior levels of the firm, not just within operations, technology and data. Yeah. The C-suite of organizations are now realizing the strategic imperative of data to deliver what an asset manager needs to deliver to its clients.
I agree. Right, let's pivot then. So we hear a lot about global operating models, center of excellence, product alignment. How are you really thinking about this? What works for your organization? How have you approached this topic? Have you fundamentally shifted what you were doing? Is there a better approach moving forward that you're seeing convergence around?
Our firm has announced some very 2030 goals that we would like to achieve. And part of that will mean a fundamental change also in terms of how we think about delivering for our clients, for the business, for our products, et cetera. And one of the things we are looking at is really being horizontal and being able to have the organization think, again, connecting the dots, but really front to back. Like if I'm doing something on onboarding, how is that impacting downstream? Or if I'm thinking, like recently, like any risk event should be one of your events that you're learning true value and changing your processes across the board, right? So I think, we're trying to become focused in an sort of organization that's going to work for 2030, not for now. And so we're going to be much more horizontal, connecting the dots, looking at our platform, looking at AI, digital as well, and then sort of making sure that we take in the priorities, run the BAU. To your point, there's so many balls you're juggling, and be able to prioritize accordingly.
That makes sense.
Yeah, very similar story. We've made a strategic decision to simplify the operating platform, and that means simplifying the front office systems, simplifying the middle office, and going from many to one. And I think that really helps, talking about data. If you've got, let's say, 5 order management systems and 6 middle offices, really trying to create that common data portal is difficult, to say the least. Having a one front end system and one middle office system really increases the chance of success exponentially. But I couldn't agree more about the need to look horizontally. If you look within many asset managers, there are multiple businesses, whether it's equity, fixed income, multi-asset liquidity, they tend to work more often than not vertically. Yep. And therefore, to join that client experience, you really need to look at horizontally. So from the initiation of a client, which is probably with a sales or CRM group, right the way through to when it funds, those things need to join horizontally. So it's really thinking about turning vertical organizations that have probably existed for decades on their side and really thinking about these businesses horizontally.
Yeah, and just like, I see operations evolving a lot, and I think people need to kind of collectively look at their organization and see what else they need. So like 6 years ago when I joined operations, I started a role called services, which we're like, well, what does that mean? And when I came from the trading side, I thought everything magically settled, right? Because that's what happens, right? It's so simple. I was very humbled, I will say that. But the services organization was created because stakeholders weren't aware how to navigate operations, right? So it's become a fundamental component of the firm now, where people go, it's the first touch point into our operational system, into our organization, and we're able to kind of handle new instruments, market events, as well as, large scale projects. But it's where people can go to and have a safe person to go to understand where to go in ops.
Andrew, coming back to something you said, though, I'm curious. What came first, the system decisions or the stakeholder management, the change management, the operating model decisions?
What came first was, what are we looking to be in the next 3 to 5 years, and what do we need to satisfy the demands of the business and our clients? And then that became, what is the best operating platform and the simplified platform that will lead to success of delivering that? Then it came looking at other technologies that surround that, and then overlaying that with what talent do we need in the organization to deliver that. Some of these are tough decisions. There's no perfect silver bullet out there, so there are compromises. But if organizations are thinking about what does great look like, how do we aspire to be, what will be needed from us in 2031, in 5 years' time, I think there's a greater chance of success. And I think, you're going back to something I said, you really got to think about the art of what's possible. We really need to stretch our imaginations of what possible could look like based on our own intentions and where we want to be, but also where's the market going. We talked about T+1, 24/7 trading. We're going to get to T0 eventually. So why stop at T1 or 24/5? Let's just imagine T0 7 days a week. If we build for that, we're not going to be doing multiple projects over the next 10 years. We then can scale back to what's actually achievable. It's a subset of what's possible, but I think starting in that sort of transformational mindset space is probably one of the most important things.
I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. We always think about what's tomorrow, not what's happening today, but how are you going to develop for tomorrow? So just going on this thematic of complexities, right? You're seeing privates bleed into, public space, and, I find like privates didn't we do that with derivatives 30, 40 years ago, being on paper, being on PDFs, and what can we do to really use what we've done already to kind of pull that forward and modernize that as well?
Interesting. So let's take that thread and maybe look to talent management in that context. I think a lot is changing in the world, right? We've talked about AI. We've got a new generation of people entering our workforce. So what are you looking for, particularly from the ops perspective? Skills, experience, how are you thinking about internal training?
I think ops has changed tremendously if you look from like 10 years ago to now, right? I think the skill set, the talent that you need is very different. So we talked a little bit about connecting the dots, but also having some ability to understand what tech can do. So, when we bring on new people, how are we going to build that critical thinking, right? They're not going to be doing the normal thing that ops used to do prior. So how are you going to build a new workforce to have that? But then they may have an edge with the AI component to do things a lot faster. But also we want to be controlled in terms of what AI we do so that we don't have a proliferation of more systems that we have only doing specific things. So we look at ROI, we look at sort of what we need to do to prioritize, but I think clear is kind, making sure we build the most optimal teams. You can't do it without optimal teams now in terms of the volume, complexity, and things that are coming on board. But yeah, I think we're in a very different age, right? Where we're dealing with AI agents that can work 24 hours and people who need to know how to design them.
Yeah, just two thoughts extending that. I think one of the things we look at when we think about teams is disruption. So having a team of, let's say, 20 people who do the same thing and have been doing for 10 years, adding another person in like that is probably not the brightest idea. So adding somebody who's either been in another team or even another industry, a different skill set into that team to ask questions like, why are you doing it this way? Or I can't believe you've been doing it in this way is really the disruption. And I think the second theme is getting back to training. I think over the next 10 years, the people that have been in the industry for a long time who have the corporate knowledge of knowing the why we do things is going to start to disappear. So really in training, we need to put a lot of emphasis on the why we do something, not just on the how. Because even with all of these tools available, people, the human still needs to spot when things aren't right. And you can't do that with an organization who's just been trained how to do steps 1 to 10. they need to understand what steps 1 to 10 represent and why we do them in that way. So that's another, I think, big area of investment that we're trying to think about.
I'm really curious though, have either of you either experienced or have concern that it's going to be challenging to attract young talent into our industry, given our ways of working? I think one can argue are a little bit behind some other industries, right? The kids graduating from college who have choices to work at very tech-forward companies. Is there anything that you guys are doing to future-proof yourselves and make sure that that young, bright talent is really excited to come work for our organizations?
I mean, do you have a problem with it?
No, look, I think it's an exciting place. I mean, you can look at it the other way, is there's some low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So, we find on some of our summer intern programs, people come into the organization for 6 or 8 weeks and solve things that we probably would not have done, just because they have new perspectives, new skills, and they're not looking within the purview of an asset manager or an organization that's been going for X number of years. So I think there's plenty of room for new talent to demonstrate very quickly the value they can bring from an organization. I think anybody early career, that's something that maybe is of interest to them.
Yeah. I think, look, the culture of a company is very important for people to want to come and work and be attracted to come into your space. Me being kind of a newbie in ops, there's no more exciting space than what we do, right? Like there's so much more to kind of chip away at and look at. And like I said, we are the engine. If the engine doesn't work, the driver can't go anywhere, right? But no, I mean, we haven't had any issues attracting talent. I think the question is making sure that the talent is trained properly so that they're able to look at problems in a critical way that we've been able to, and ask those questions that Andrew talked about. If you have a new person, addressing those sort of maybe gaps and being able to figure out solutions.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, there's far more transparency. I mean, for people who join the organization, them being able to see the impact of what they're doing is very transparent to the organization as a whole. That probably wouldn't have existed 2 decades ago.
Yeah.
So the analyst who's been there 6-8 weeks and develops a dashboard that gives a level of visibility of data or an output that is useful to a senior management or leadership team automatically gets that person transparency that probably wouldn't have existed previously.
Yeah, and we're pretty flat. Like everybody can kind of sort of come to you and have these, these hackathons we have really encourage people to have a two-way conversation. You have to have that two-way conversations to understand where their pain points are.
It's really interesting. And then what about for your more senior folks, right? What's the advice that you're giving them to stay relevant 10 years from now?
Stay plugged in, be curious, make sure that you're asking the questions. I think, I started BlackRock when it was 8,000, now we're like 27 or 30,000. You have to make sure you know where to go and you can navigate the firm. So, whenever there's an announcement, I go like, hi, I'm Mariam, I'm the COO of portfolio services, and how can I help? So those connections and that relationship is so important to make sure you maintain so you can navigate.
Yeah, look, I think the conversation transformation is not optional, but change is not new. It's just a different word we're using for change. And all of us through our careers have had to learn things that we haven't been familiar with. I think, as we said earlier on, it's just the pace that this is happening at really means, whether you're senior or junior, the need to absorb and to learn about new technologies, new ways of learning and being open to it are probably now far more prevalent than they were, again, 10 years ago. So we are seeing good connectivity, a good understanding of the why we're doing this and the need to transform. And ultimately, as I say, for any asset manager, it's really about delivering the client experience and delivering the best products.
So we've talked a lot about operating models, talent management. Let's talk a little bit more about the actual meat of what we're doing here. What are some exciting new products, new ways of working that you guys are exploring, new frontiers that you're cracking open?
Yeah, I mean, I think Andrew touched on 24-hour trading. I think NASDAQ's coming in June or July with that. We've seen trading in Saudi on Sunday, developing our operating models to be efficient and be able to handle that, but also the digital front. Obviously, everybody is talking about digital and crypto and stable coins and tokenization. I think it's important that we're all sort of looking towards that path. If I look at sort of the newer generation coming on, digital wallets are going to be the thing. I mean, who has cash here? was cash.
Nope.
Not a lot of people carry cash anymore, right? And are we getting into that next phase of what do we need to be a fiduciary? What do our clients demand? How much of their percentage of portfolio do they want in those products, right? So obviously you guys know we are an IBIT, and that's been an incredible journey since 2022 when we partnered up with Coinbase to start trading in Bitcoin. But marrying the DeFi, and the TradFi space is probably comforting for some people to kind of start dabbling into those spaces. So I think with the advancement of digitalization, tokenization, it will hopefully provide lower cost, better transparency, ability to settle faster. I think you said T0, why don't we look at T0? And then, in that space, give clients what they need. And we've been very, very big and vocal about that point.
Yeah, similarly, clients are looking for solutions, and solutions are no longer single asset classes. They're about a collection of things that represent those clients, investment requirements, risk profiles, and that could be in any asset class. They're not just public or private, but crypto. It could be tax solutioning. It could be various different things. And I think some of the things we've been speaking about is creating an operating model that scales for all of those things. It'd be no good now simplifying an operating platform for today's business, only then to find ourselves in the same position in 10 years' time, because we've gone and developed little silos to deliver different solutions on different asset classes. We need to start thinking about how we develop these for the broader asset set, not just what we have today, but what could come in the future.
Fascinating. Yeah. All right, let's move on to our lightning round then. One ops myth that you would love to permanently retire.
That we're all manual.
That we're just a back office.
Yes. The most underestimated source of operational risk today.
Communication.
I'd say the same. Yeah.
Best advice you've ever received about leading large-scale operations, especially from a newbie.
Tell people everything, because if you tell them everything, you might discover something you don't know. But in terms of leading large-scale operations, try to be forward-thinking, understand what your stakeholders' needs and wants are, ensure that you're delivering, and make sure you partner up and create those connections, that relationship currency.
Yeah, results aren't the only thing. Results, people, and process, all three need to happen together. Results in their own right are short-lived.
And last but not least, if you could magically wave your wand here in Disney World and fix one post-trade problem overnight, what would it be?
My goodness. I would like to get rid of all emails and faxes, believe it or not. They still happen.
Faxes. Okay, I'll take
yes,
that.
So I have a project called Faxes and Emails. Ew, but no, it's actually called Budget something. But yeah, I can't, we're talking about all this digital stuff, but there are still instances that we do that. So I would love it if we could get rid of that.
Yes, we should eliminate failed trades. So again, thinking about the art of what's possible, there should be a world where the only trade that fails at an asset manager is where the broker's short of stock. All the other reasons for a failed trade should be eliminated over time through some of the things we've been talking about.
Great. Well, thank you both for your time.
Thank you.
Very insightful. Thank you.